This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 292 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with garden writer, speaker, and radio host C.L. Furnari about hydrangea tips and tricks. The plant profile is on cornflower, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with a last word on Benji and the Bees from Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by garden lady C.L. Furnari. Welcome, C.L.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you on. And you have a brand new book out called Hydrangea, Happiness, Planting, Pruning, and Blooming, when we're going to get into all things hydrangeas. But before we do that, C.L., we want to know all about baby C.L. And were you born with chlorophyll in your veins and a green thumb?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I have lived many places. I was born in Colorado. I was raised in California, Indiana, and Wisconsin. And I think that my attraction to plants was because I was a free-range child. As a kid, it was a time when children were pushed outside and told not to come back in until mealtime. And as long as you showed up for meals, you were expected to make your entertainment out in the natural world. And in so many ways, for so many of us, that was a blessing. So my interest in plants came from hanging out with plants. And my first professional experience in horticulture was when I was in the second grade, and my friend Babs from across the street and I decided we wanted to buy candy. And we didn't have any money. And so how do you earn money? You sell something. So we looked around behind and in the garage, and there was a stack of old clay flower pots in the garage that my parents were renting this house at the time. So we took some of those flower pots and we filled them with dirt from behind the garage. And then we scampered around the neighborhood, stealing flowers from our neighbors' gardens and poking them in the dirt, and then going with the radio flyer wagon door to door and selling them as potted plants. Now, fortunately, since that time, I have learned a great deal more about ethics and the importance of root systems.
But did you sell a lot is the question.
You know, I don't remember how successful it was. I do remember very nice looking ladies, neighbor ladies, opening the door and appearing to be charmed. And we were probably trying to sell the plants to the very people that we had stolen them from in the first place.
Yes, of course. I'd be like, that looks like a very familiar daisy right there.
Exactly.
So for your professional career, I know you have a background in art and graphics. And what brought you to horticulture and garden communications?
Yeah, I've always loved the garden, but for many years I worked as an artist, first in the world of fiber and then with photo-generated collage. A lot of my work had to do with plants and gardening. It was a recurring theme, particularly in my collage work. And I never intended to be a garden writer. I never intended to be a speaker, a radio host, any of the things that I do today. But when I moved to Cape Cod in 1993, I looked for a book about gardening on the Cape, and there wasn't one. In fact, the only book that was sold that was, supposed to be for people who garden on the Cape was called Gardening by the Sea, and it was so old that it recommended kudzu as being a good plant. So seeing that, I decided, well, I've been using my camera for my artwork. I'm going to drive around the Cape for a couple of years, interview gardeners, take pictures of their gardens, and see if I can interest a publisher in a book about it. And that's what I did. In those days, it was all slides, not digital photography, but that's what I did. And after a couple of years, I approached publishers with book proposal for a book about Cape Cod gardeners and gardening. And the national publishers told me it was too regional. Mm-hmm. And the regional publishers told me it was too expensive, because at that time, full color books were more expensive than they are now. At that point, I was ready to give it up. But then one of the publishers came back to me and said, we can't afford a full color photography book, but would you like to write a book of general garden advice for Cape Cod? And my thought was that if a publisher asks if you'd like to write a book, the answer should be yes. And that was the start of me pivoting from working artist to working garden communicator. And now 9 books later, I still use photography and I still use my graphic skills, but I'm first and foremost a garden speaker, writer, and radio host.
Wow. So listeners, you might be familiar with Ciel's radio show, and we should tell them how they can listen to that maybe online.
Yes. It is called The Garden Lady, and it is broadcast on WCAI and WGBH radio out of Boston and Cape Cod. And if you go to the CII website, which is capeandislands.org, you can stream the program live, and you can also see the recordings, which I believe are also put up on Spotify.
Great. And let's talk a little bit about Cape Cod, where you are based. I know you're Zone 7, like I am.
No, that's not true.
No, you're not Zone 7.
Well, that's what the USDA claims, but they lie. Those zones are average temperatures. Mm-hmm. And Cape Cod is so long and narrow that when you average, the temperature out in Provincetown and Truro, which is surrounded by the ocean, and the 2 islands that are surrounded by the ocean, it comes out seeming as if Cape Cod is all a Zone 7. If you plant Zone 7 plants here, you are setting yourself up for disappointment because we are solidly a warm Zone 6.
Okay. And then that surrounding ocean air we'll talk about in a little bit, but let's talk about your home garden and what you like to grow.
Well, people often say, what's your favorite plant? And my answer is whatever I looked at 10 minutes ago. I have many perennials. I grow a lot of annuals. There's a great deal of flower power here. I grow shrubs and trees. I grow native plants. We have a very large vegetable garden and assorted berry bushes and all. And my favorite time of year is right about now through September, when I can walk into my front yard and say, what's for dinner? And I get several replies. So I grow all kinds of things. I, of course, grow hydrangeas. The blue hydrangea, the blue mophead hydrangea, is kind of Cape Cod's signature plant. Mm-hmm. And so I do certainly grow a lot of hydrangeas for that reason, and because my property is open every year for the Cape Cod Hydrangea Festival.
And that's in July, correct?
Yes, it's always 10 days after the 4th of July, and over 2 weekends. And there are private gardens open for $5 per garden per person, Cape-wide. Some are only open 1 day, some are open 5 days. I don't think any of them are open all 10 days. But it's a wonderful event, and it benefits local nonprofits.
Excellent. So anybody heading to the Cape, be sure to visit at least a few of those gardens. How many total are on the festival this year, Ciel?
I believe there are 95 gardens that are open this year. Oh. It usually ranges between 90 and 110, but I think this year it's about 95. And for many different nonprofits, I'm open 4 days, including for the Sandwich Food Pantry and our Volunteer Master Gardener organization and the Sandwich Art Alliance.
And I'm a completist, Ciel. I have to confess that that would kill me to get to all 95, but I would try. I would try.
Well, it's pretty much impossible. What people need to do, because the Cape is long and thin, and it takes about an hour and a half to get from the bottom, Woods Hole, up to the top, Provincetown. And so really the thing to do is to come one year and concentrate on gardens in the lower Cape, and then one year and concentrate on gardens in the mid Cape, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a relaxed way to do things. Many of the gardens that are open every single year.
And as you said, hydrangea, especially that blue mophead, is the signature flower of the festival and of Cape Cod. So you're going to get lots and lots of gorgeous photos of those, I'm sure.
That's right. And if people want information about the Hydrangea Festival, all they have to do is Google Cape Cod Hydrangea Fest, and it will come right up.
Excellent. So let's turn now to the topic of hydrangea tips and care. And we've talked about pruning on the podcast, and I'll link to that episode with Lorraine Bellato and about different hydrangea varieties that we did with Andrew Bunting. But CL, I'd like to pick your brains on some of the lesser known hydrangea care facts and some of those myths and lies out there, right? Which are many.
Sure.
So let's start with watering. I think after pruning, that might be the top topic, right, of hydrangeas, is when it lays down on a hot summer day. And even though I know it rained yesterday and had a good inch maybe of rain, I have to confess, CL, I still water it. It just looks so sad.
Yeah. Well, and you may or you may not need to. If you're, here's the thing about wilting hydrangeas is that their big flowers and their big leaves release moisture into the air, particularly in sun or on a hot summer day, or even more problematic on a breezy hot summer day. And that water is released through the leaves and flowers faster than the stems and roots can pull more water up from the ground. And so it looks to you like the hydrangea is thirsty. It's just not able to pump that water up fast enough to keep the leaves and the flowers firm. And how you know that that's true is if you don't water it and your plant recovers by 6:30 in the evening, you'll know that it has at that point been able to get enough water up and it looks fine again. The key to having particularly the blue mop heads last for a long time is to grow them in afternoon shade so that they are less likely to wilt.
Yeah, I think that is a great advice, that morning sun, afternoon shade. Not all of us might have that exposure, but as best you can, right?
As best you can. And frankly, if you don't have that exposure and you want to grow blue mop heads, there are any number of lovely shorter varieties like Sky View that you can plant in a container, and then you can have it on your shady porch or on your shady patio or, some other location, and enjoy that blue mop head if you don't have that shady spot in the garden to place it. And then plant a paniculata that likes the sun in your sunshine.
That's great advice, to plant them in containers. There's nothing wrong, right, with putting them in containers. People just, I think, traditionally use them as foundation planting.
Well, here you plant a hydrangea wherever you have a square inch that's open. So it doesn't have to be by the foundation.
No.
It's in gardens, it's in containers, it's, where it's next to the vegetable garden. So
yeah, I think I mostly see it grouped in along foundations here, or fence lines is another classic place for at least for the big mop heads. And that does bring up placement of plant and size. And I always tell my listeners that plant tags lie, right? They might say mature size, but it's probably more like the 5 to 10 year size.
That's right. You should always add at least a couple of feet onto what the plant tag says, particularly for the lace caps and the mop heads, because you can't make those shorter. And throughout my book, Hydrangea Happiness, I've got little poems that help people remember certain things. And the one for the mop heads is, the height of this hydrangea, admit that I can't change ya. Because they replace their growth in one season. There is no keeping them under the windowsill. There is, if it's a plant that genetically wants to be 4 to 5 feet tall, like Endless Summer, it will be 4 to 5 feet tall no matter when and how you prune it.
And they are breeding shorter ones, dwarf ones.
Absolutely.
So, start off with the ones that say 3 to 5 feet or 2 to 3 feet, right?
Well, that's right. And then expect that it could be larger. Although the ones that they are selecting for small size, I have found are less likely to get huge, with the possible exception of Little Lime. Little Lime, I believe, was listed as a 3 to 5 plant. I've got one that's currently 7 feet tall and 8 feet wide, and it's still growing.
Wow. So not so little lime for sure.
Not so little lime, that's right. I'm pruning it as a tree form, however. Since it's a paniculata, it can be pruned as a tree form, and that is an excellent way to manage paniculatas that get taller than you expected. If you don't want to move them, arborize them.
I love that, arborize them. I feel like we can say that for a lot of things. Arborize them.
Arborize it, that's right.
Arborize them.
Rhododendrons, arborize them. Mountain laurel, do it, arborize it.
Yep. And then you can stick some more things, other smaller shrubs underneath.
Underneath, that's right. I just arborized my gold thread cypress and planted some hostas and a juga underneath it.
So hydrangeas are known for being in beachside communities like Cape Cod and thriving. Are they salt resistant?
Well, they are, if you are right on the ocean and have a continual salt spray, you don't want to plant them there, no. But on the other hand, clients that I work with who live on the ocean, they have hydrangeas. The problem is, right on the ocean, the problem is more constant wind and drying out and sun than it is salt spray. But the reason that hydrangeas do so well in maritime climates is that we are warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. And it's the cooler in the summer part that is particularly beneficial.
Yeah, I think the cooling off in the evening especially.
Well, it's just we don't, it's unusual to get to 90 degrees here. Whereas many parts of the country, that's not unusual in the summertime.
Yeah, I was thinking about the salt tolerance in particular because in your book you discuss their vulnerability to herbicide damage. So if somebody is spraying their lawn or other pesticides in the area, that can drift easily onto the hydrangeas.
Yeah, the herbicides in particular, and that includes weed prevention. The products that are to prevent weeds, hydrangeas are very susceptible to. And I can't tell you the number of times that I have counseled a "can this marriage be saved" couple where he has put down weed protection, insisting that it's safe, and it has totally damaged the hydrangeas and given them weird growth and herbicide damage, and she has been very unhappy about it.
And is there any steps that we can take to recover? Say if your neighbor sprayed a pesticide while you were away and you come back to find damage on it?
Yeah, if you find herbicide damage, the main thing is, first of all, to flood the soil as best you can. If you can tell that it's already damaged, it's not going to work to rinse off the plant. If you can see the damage, if their leaves are dead or if they're contorted or whatever you're seeing, rinsing off the plant isn't going to help, but flushing out the soil might. And then time, because the plants, if they're not totally damaged at root level, which usually they are not, they will come back from the roots, but it might take them a year or two to recover.
So not all is lost, thank goodness.
That's right.
What are the main pests of hydrangeas?
Well, it depends on where you live, of course. Thrips can be an issue here on Cape Cod and on Long Island. We have chili thrips, which is in the south an agricultural pest, but it attacks hydrangea foliage. It's a cosmetic issue only, so doesn't do damage to the flowers, but does make the leaves look kind of bad. There are scales that attack hydrangeas, and particularly one that looks like little pieces of white cotton on the underside of the leaves. There are, on the smooth hydrangeas, such as Annabelle, the hydrangea leaf tire ties the top foliage into this tiny little packet, and then it proceeds to eat out the flower as it's protected in the packet that it's created. And so people with that in certain areas need to either open up those packets early on and spray with spinosad, or clip them off and throw them away. So, or decide that they're just going to ignore it and see what happens. That's a perfectly viable response at all times. So, but those are the main things. Deer like certain hydrangeas, particularly paniculatas and the smooth hydrangeas, Hydrangea arborescens. So deer can be an issue. Bunnies usually leave them alone.
Yeah, that was my impression, that hydrangeas have a toxic substance. They're not good for you to eat, not good for your pets. I don't particularly see dogs chomping on them, but, don't let them if they do have the proclivity for chewing on things. But I thought rabbits mainly stayed away, but deer still chew on them. I feel like deer must have stomachs of steel.
Well, I've read some about that, and there are many theories as to why the deer can eat hydrangeas and other animals do not, because of this toxic substance. And the prevailing theory, and it is a theory, nobody has spent time and money in investigating this, but the theory is that the deer browse so much leaf matter in the course of a day. And when they are eating a hydrangea, they are usually just clipping off the tops, maybe a few branches, 10 inches down, but usually it's the tender parts and the tops. And that's a fraction of their diet. And so it is thought that because they aren't solely dining on hydrangeas, they have everything else that they're putting in their mouths that kind of mitigates the hydrangea problem.
So maybe put some deer repellent around the shrubs. I was thinking that maybe even the granular might be a better one to do rather than spray the foliage.
I have found that's not the case, Kathy, because the deer are grazing high up. They're not sniffing the ground. If it was rabbits, the ground might be good. But I have found that the best repellent on hydrangeas is plant skid, which is blood-based, and you spray it right on the top of the plants, which is where the deer graze. It's absorbed into the foliage after, a couple of days. You don't see it, you don't smell it, but the deer do. And it lasts for months. And so on the hydrangeas that I have that are vulnerable, I spray with plant skid fall and spring, only twice, and the deer leave them alone, and they graze on my neighbor's hydrangea, which is 10 feet away from mine.
Good to know. So
yeah, my neighbor has what I consider the trap crop for deer.
And don't let them know your plant skid secrets. Yeah.
Well, that's at the top of their driveway, and they don't really care. So
Great. So let's move on to common diseases. So leaf spot is what I usually see, or fungal diseases.
Yeah, that's the main thing for hydrangeas. Some areas have powdery mildew on certain plants, so that can be an issue, but leaf spot fungus is the primary one. And I have to tell people who have had this on their hydrangeas, we often say avoid getting the foliage wet when you water, and that's valid advice. That's good advice. And for many people, they don't realize that the lawn irrigation is drifting onto their hydrangeas. So be aware that your lawn irrigation may be hitting those plants frequently, and you think, oh, they're not getting wet because I have drip irrigation. So know about that. But the third thing that people need to realize is that this can be genetically determined as well. There are some hydrangeas that are genetically just more prone to leaf disease. And that is why you might see one variety of hydrangea filled with leaf spot, and the others, it's a minor problem. And I have had personally hydrangeas that I have dug up out of my garden and tossed in the woods because I have better things to do than to treat for leaf spot on hydrangeas when there are so many dozens that tolerate it and aren't, profoundly affected.
So that's what in the rose world we call shovel pruning.
There you go.
So
Yep.
get rid of those that are most affected and buy ones that are more disease resistant or doing better for you.
Yes, there are just thousands and thousands of plants that we don't have to treat with insecticides or fungicides. And why plant things that you have to worry about when there are so many things that you can have in your garden that you don't have to treat?
Great point. And so let's talk about some of those varieties that you've trialed, maybe some of your favorites of each kind. And let's start with the macrophylla.
Okay, the macrophylla, which are commonly called big leaf hydrangeas, and most of them are mop heads, although there are a few, such as twist and shout, that look like lace cap hydrangeas. So, but they are mostly mop heads. I like Endless Summer. The only thing about Endless Summer that I'm not thrilled with is that it's not particularly stem sturdy. But I love, in the Endless Summer collection, I love Summer Crush. Summer Crush is a bright pink in alkaline soil, and it's a dark blue to purple in acidic soil. It is stem sturdy. In my garden right now, it's about 4 feet tall. It's fairly bud hardy. So Summer Crush is one that I am quite enthusiastic about. Another mop head that I love very much, one of the newer varieties, is Sky View. That's from the Proven Winners folks. And this is one, when I grew Sky View, and we had a very unusual winter when it got to be 9 degrees below zero and all the hydrangeas died to the ground. Sky View came back from the get-go with flowers at the end of all the new growth. And it's a pretty, slightly smaller mop head that ranges from a pale pink and then lavender and blue into the lavenders. It really is like a sunset in a way, a pale sunset. And so that is a nice one. And it's about 3 feet tall in my garden.
I agree with Summer Crush. That's a winner in my garden too.
Yeah. It's a nice plant. And I wish they'd come out with an Endless Summer that's the same size as the Endless Summer and the same color and same good bud hardiness, but is more stem sturdy.
And speaking of hydrangea breeding, there are so many new introductions, Seal. I don't even know how you keep up with all of them.
Well, there are, and that's a good thing. I do want to mention, however, to people, Kathy, that the hydrangeas that we see, particularly in box stores and supermarkets and garden centers around Easter and Mother's Day, those are florist hydrangeas. They have been bred for how they perform in the greenhouse to get them to be the right size and blooming at the right time for gift plants at Easter and Mother's Day. And many times people think, oh, these are great, I'll put these in my yard. And some of them you may be successful growing in your yard, but some of them you might not be. That these are plants that are not intended to be a long-lasting relationship. They're intended to be a hydrangea hookup that makes you feel good for a couple of months and then it's gone.
Yeah, they're great florist hydrangeas. I would call them gift hydrangeas.
More and more of them every year, and they're gorgeous, and they're in every supermarket and every box store from before Easter until, 3 weeks after Mother's Day. And just know that it may or may not be a successful landscape plant for you. If you already have it, by all means, stick it in the ground if you have a place. Yeah. But if you want a beautiful hydrangea, go to your garden center and pick one that was bred to be a landscape plant.
And there are so many to choose from, as we said.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
Are your ad campaigns lighting up the dashboard, but not the pipeline? That's bullspend, and marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
My boss asked for results, so I opened my dashboard for the only positive-sounding metric I had: impressions.
Cut the bull spend. See revenue, not just reach. LinkedIn delivers the highest return on ad spend of major ad networks. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Let's talk about the smooth hydrangeas, Hydrangea arborescens. There's lots of great introductions there.
Yeah, they are great plants because, first of all, they are native, and they're native to the mid-Atlantic region. Well, actually, to most of the eastern USA, you can find smooth hydrangeas. The ones in the wild look kind of like lace caps. They've got fertile flowers on the outside, and then they've got these sterile sepals around the as a ring around the middle fertile flowers. And I often say that those sepals, those are the neon lights in the bar that are saying open for business, right? Come in and drink. So this is a plant this was the first hydrangea taken to Europe from the United States. It was Europe's introduction to hydrangeas before the mopheads reached from Asia. They had our smooth hydrangea. And the breeders have worked on these. Annabelle is a long favorite, although it's not at all stem sturdy, and so it falls over after a heavy rain. But the breeders are coming out with more stem sturdy varieties. We have 2 on the market this year. One is storm-proof and one is flowerful. Both of those are white, prolific bloomers, nice, beautiful round flowers, and stem sturdiness so that they don't flop after a rain.
And great names.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm in love with the pink ones. Invincible Spirit 2 and Blush are wonderful pink varieties. I like the green ones. There is Sublime and Limette. Those are green, and if you're a flower arranger, you know how great a green flower is with a purple or a pink flower, right? So those are good, particularly for flower arranging. So, and there are also varieties that are made to attract pollinators that are similar to the native one with the fertile interior and the outside ring of the sterile florets. And one of those is Pinky Pollen Ring. So those are all, good plants for pollinators.
Yeah, and I would think hydrangeas don't have much of a scent. They're not known for their fragrance, but are there any that you grow that are fragrance-y?
Well, some of the paniculatas, particularly the ones that are a combination of fertile flowers and the infertile sepals. So the ones that look more lacy, things like Pink Diamond and Pinky Winky, Little Quickfire and Quickfire. Both of those are plants that have a combination, and because they have the fertile flowers, they have a slight fragrance because that's one way that they pull the pollinators in, right? So, but it's slight. There's a reason that, you don't hear too much about hydrangea fragrance, and that's because it really is fairly negligible.
Is there any breeding being done to introduce maybe more fragrance?
Well, there is. In fact, there's a man in the South who is breeding plants, paniculatas, for different colors and for fragrance. And some of those, I think, will be making it into the marketplace. So you should watch for new varieties always, and you can be sure if anything has more fragrance, they will use that as a selling point.
I'm definitely going to look out for those because I'm a big fan of fragrance in the garden. Although hydrangeas, they have already earned their place just because of their beauty.
Well, diversity, right? That's the name of the game in the garden, diversity of plants and color, fragrance, edibility, go for it all.
And speaking of breeding and new things on the market, we should share with our listeners a little bit about propagating and ethics, I think.
Yeah, this is something that I frequently talk about. And the reason is people ask me, well, why didn't you talk about propagating hydrangeas? And hydrangeas are very easy to propagate, which makes people happy, and I appreciate that. But most of the hydrangeas that are sold today are patented plants. They're patented and trademarked, and it is illegal to propagate them. Now, if you have a hydrangea that has put off a side shoot and you decide to dig that up and move it someplace else in the yard, that's common gardening, right? I wouldn't worry about that. But deciding that you are going to propagate dozens of, your limelight or your endless summer or, whatever it is that you are enthralled with, that's not only illegal, but I think it's disrespectful. And people will say to me, but, well, how will anyone know? And my response is, well, if you're not selling them on the internet, they won't know, but you will know. And sometimes we do the right thing because it's the right thing. And these breeders and brands, they develop hundreds of hydrangeas every year, and other plants, of course, that they trial, and they spend years trialing them in many parts of the country to make sure they're a good plant. There are hundreds of plants that never make the cut and never come to market. And the ones that finally do make the cut and come to market and have the marketing machine behind them so you know about them, those people deserve to get something back on their investment. And they deserve our respect. And so, I would say to you, if you want to propagate hydrangeas, first of all, if you know the name of your hydrangea, you can go to Google Patent and see if it's still under patent, all right? And see if it's trademarked, you can Google it and see if the trademark is still active. But there are many, many older varieties of hydrangeas that are lovely and good and deserve to be, shared with your friends that aren't patented and they aren't trademarked. And I say, go for it, propagate the hell out of those plants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it was a pass-along plant from your grandmother, say, you're pretty much in the clear. You can share that one easily.
Plants, there are plants that were sold, commonly sold 25, 30 years ago that have just dropped out of the marketplace. And it's a shame. It's a shame that they have, because many of them are very good plants, or they might be a very good plant for your area. So look into it, do your research, and just, show the current breeders and branders and the ones that are still under patent and trademark, show them some respect.
Absolutely. So one of the things I loved in your book is the cut flower tips and advice. And so you have a listing of the hydrangeas that are best for cut flowers. But CL, have you ever cut a hydrangea and it not done well?
Well, if you cut a hydrangea flower that's very, very fresh, if you cut that blue mop head in early July when it's pale blue and just a gorgeous sky blue, it's not going to do well. It's going to wilt. So you have to wait until those plants are older. What people need to know about hydrangea, what we consider the flower or the inflorescence, what we consider that flower is mostly sepals. They are not petals. They are not flower petals. They are sepals, and a sepal is a modified leaf. And that's why a hydrangea flower, the blossom that we love, lasts so long, is because those aren't flower petals that we're looking at. They are modified leaves. But those will be fragile when they're brand new. And so you wait for those to mature into August, and the hydrangea blue ones certainly will change color. They'll change to a lavender or a pale green and lavender. Some of them take on a little blush of burgundy. So once those sepals are more mature, they last for a long, long time. And that's when you can cut them. And the white ones as well. If you cut the white paniculatas too early, they will wilt. So wait until they get a little bit more mature, and then you can make those cuts.
That explains, I thought it was the heat. That I was just cutting them on a hot day why they were wilty.
Well, that's never a good idea. Whenever you pick a hydrangea, you want to pick it in the morning, not at the end of the day. Pick it in the morning when it's not under heat stress, and immediately put the stem in water. But even if you do that when the flower is fresh and sky blue at this time of year, it's going to wilt. It's not going to stay.
Great advice. And I was thinking about, for some of the cut flower arrangements that people do, they make great dried flowers, of course, famously as a wreath. And I see people using floral dyes or sprays on them, even some glitter.
In fact, if many florists, if they have an order for blue hydrangeas for a wedding or whatever, they take white hydrangeas and spray paint them. Just know that, okay? Just know that. And that's why when you see professional wedding photographs and you see those hydrangeas that are sky blue, that's how they did it. It's not that they were able to pick the sky blue hydrangeas. The second thing to know about floral hydrangeas is there are many hydrangeas that are bred to be cut flowers, and they are different than the ones you grow in your yard. They are more substantial. The flowers are more substantial, and they're more substantial so they hold up longer in a bouquet, and they're more substantial because sometimes they're spray painted. And if you want to grow the equivalent of a floral hydrangea that is more substantial that way, look for the Magical series. Magical Revolution is one of them. There are several in that series. So if you Google Magical hydrangeas, you'll find them. And they came from breeders in the Netherlands that were breeding for cut flowers.
I would definitely have to look out for some of those. So you touched on a little bit about that color changing, right? That those with alkaline soil tend to get more of the pink ranges. Those with acidic soil tend to get more of the blue. And if it's white, right?
Yeah. Well, that's only for two varieties. Okay. That's only for the macrophyllus, the big leaf, and the serratas, which are the mountain type. The paniculatas do not change according to pH. The smooth hydrangeas, the arborescens do not change according to pH. So the oak leaf does not change according to pH. But know that the panicles and the oak leaf and the smooth hydrangeas, they can change color as the flower matures. So you'll have panicles that go from white to pink, for example, or some oak leaves that go from white to pink, or you will have some arborescens that go from white to green. So they do change, but not in response to pH, and nothing is going to make them blue.
Not unless you spray paint them, right?
Unless you spray paint them, that's right.
Yep. So let's turn to some of those myths, lies, and the latest dirt section of your book. And the first myth is about coffee and adding that to your hydrangeas.
Yeah, this is, coffee has been thought to have some special woo-woo for a lot of plants, but a lot of people, particularly those who have alkaline soil and are looking for ways to keep or turn their hydrangeas blue, will talk about putting coffee around to make the soil acidic. First of all, coffee grounds that have been brewed into coffee, the acid has come out in your coffee cup. You drank it. So the grounds aren't particularly acidic. But secondly, any organic matter, whether it's coffee grounds or sometimes people think pine needles or oak leaves or whatever, even if it starts out being acidic, in the composting process, as they break down, pH comes to near neutral. You could start out with a compost pile made of all coffee grounds and pine needles, and once it was composted, it would test at about 6.5. So no acidic material that you put around a plant is going to, over time, make the soil more acidic, because as it decomposes into the soil, it comes to neutral. So by all means, if you want to put coffee grounds, it's organic matter, throw it around your plants, throw it around your roses, whatever you want to do. I put it in my compost pile, and then I'm done with it.
That brings us to the darling of the internet, banana water.
Oh, goodness. You know what? There's something new now, Kathy. There is a new banana water. Potato peel water is the new banana water on the internet. Yes. And it's just as stupid as banana water. These things get started online, and they make, people like quirky things. People like to think that there's something that they can do with what they already have that is going to make magic. And I appreciate the desire for making magic, but banana water is useless. Bananas aren't even that high in potassium like people think they are. A potato is higher in potassium. Watermelon is higher in potassium. A beet is higher in potassium than a banana. So banana water, why would you want to have those disgusting jars of banana peels floating around in swamp water, or potato peels floating around in swamp water, when you can, first of all, if you want to give your plants a boost, put some compost around the base of the plant. It looks good. It's instantly good for those plants, and do that.
And by all means, just throw your peelings, potato, banana, whatever, into your compost pile.
Yeah,
and it'll eventually add back.
Put all of that stuff into the compost pile, and it's good then because it all gets kind of homogenized. You don't end up with too much coffee grounds or anything, and be done with it. Or there are many services now. People who don't want to make their own compost, there are many services that pick up their food waste and then make compost out of it, and that's a wonderful thing as well.
And then there are the old wives' tales, Epsom salt, and rusty nails.
Yeah, Epsom salt. When I was working on my book, Coffee for Roses, I went back and looked in old-time newspapers for what they were recommending for Epsom salt. And they were recommending it for both something to curl your hair and for hair removal. As well as putting it on plants. Epsom salts are pure magnesium. Do you know that you need magnesium in your soil? If you need magnesium, maybe you'd want to use it, but otherwise you don't want to put it on your soil. My soil here on Cape Cod, in fact, all of Cape Cod soil, when you have it tested, it's off the charts already in magnesium. The last thing in the world that I want to add to my soil is magnesium. So anyway, Epsom salts are not the magic potion that many people think. And the rusty nails, for a long time, actually, people didn't understand why hydrangeas changed color. It wasn't until the early 20th century that they understood that it was aluminum in the soil, and what allowed the aluminum to be taken up was acidic conditions, the acidic soil. So that's a fairly recent knowledge, but I think in that passing on of that information, I think people confused aluminum with any other metal. I have heard bury nickels around your plant.
Yep.
I have heard rusty nails. Now, in the old days, if you had enough rusty nails and your nails were iron and you had like hundreds of them, that could make the soil slightly more acidic. So that's where that got its start. And nails aren't made out of the same thing anymore. And so nails don't rust anymore. So that, don't waste your nails, don't waste your nickels. If you want to make your soil more acidic, use sulfur. If you think that you have no aluminum, most people do have aluminum in their soil, so they don't need to add aluminum. But if you do decide to use the aluminum sulfate that's available, use it sparingly. Don't overdo it. Your flowers can, number one, be destroyed by too much aluminum sulfite. Or number two, they can turn a swimming pool aqua blue that looks really creepy.
Yeah, we won't touch the pool coloring right now.
That's right.
We'll leave that topic alone.
sulfur. And if you do have alkaline soil, you will have to repeatedly, it's hard to change soil pH. In my garden, I don't even try. A plant either does well in my native soil or I move on to the next because it's hard to change pH. And so my philosophy is I plant the hydrangea, whatever color it is, it is.
And if you really, really want to control it, maybe a container grown, as we were talking about earlier.
But even in containers, know that the potting mixes are alkaline. And even in a container, you will have to repeatedly add sulfur, in order to keep one blue.
So how can our listeners contact you to find out more, CL?
Yeah, you can find my website. It's gardenlady.com. All my contact information is there. A link to my radio program is there. Information about all my books are there. And as well as my email and social buttons. So gardenlady.com, that's the place to go.
Great. I'll have that link in our show notes along with a link to your new book, Hydrangea Happiness. So for a final question, this is going to be the toughest one, CL.
Uh-oh.
And that's your favorite hydrangea.
Yeah, that's tough because it really, it's according to species, right? If I had to say my favorite mophead, it's Mathilda Guchess, and I hesitate to even name that name because that's a plant that people can no longer buy. That's one that, find a Mathilda Guchess and propagate it, please, because it is a good plant with a dark, rich blue and slightly shorter than Endless Summer and stem sturdy. It used to be the Mother's Day hydrangea, but it no longer is because there are better ones for greenhouse purposes. But it is one that I love. Now, in terms of a hydrangea that people can find, I would say probably Twist and Shout is one of them. And I would say Tough Stuff Aha. That is a favorite of mine. And I would also say, let me think of the smooth. I guess Invincible Spirit 2 is my favorite smooth hydrangea.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite as well. The Invincible Spirit 2, I have several in different areas and even one in the container, and it does fabulously for me.
Yeah. And in terms of an oak leaf, and we've kind of glossed over the oak leaves today, which is a shame. You know what the oak leaf hydrangeas need? They need a really good marketer. They really do. But Jetstream is a really lovely variety, and I encourage people to check out the Jetstream oak leaf hydrangea.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sia.
It's been a pleasure, Kathy. Always a pleasure to speak with other plant people.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Cornflower plant profile. Cornflower Centaurea cyana is also known as bachelor's buttons. It blooms in late spring, typically in bright blue, but It also has varieties with pink, white, or purple flowers. The flowers resemble thistles, but they are not thorny or sharp. The blooms are pollinator magnets and are often grown in cut flower gardens. The plants grow to between 1 to 3 feet tall and may need staking. Cornflower is native to Europe and is used in folk medicine as an herbal digestive. It's hardy to zones 2 to 11. It's easy to start from seed and can self-sow prolifically. Deadheaded to limit the seed production, but note that birds love the seeds, and doing this will limit their access to that food source. Cornflower prefers full sun and well-draining soils. It is deer and drought resistant. It does not need fertilizing. Cornflower, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, I'm enjoying the blooms on my Monarda, aka bee balm, milkweeds, echinacea, early sunflowers, and mountain mint. Over at the community garden plot, we picked the first cherry tomato citrine, and I cut the bolted cilantro to save for seeds, also known as coriander. In garden tips that we shared this week, we talked about early summer garden chores, including to have pumpkins by Halloween. You can start them from seed, direct sown in the soil, anytime between the end of June and the 4th of July. In local gardening events that you might want to attend, on Saturday, July 11th, from 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. at Green Spring Gardens in Alexandria, Virginia, is a garden tour, Beatrice Farron's Legacy. Beatrice Farron's small-scale landscape at Green Spring is one of the few surviving gardens of this acknowledged master of 20th century American landscape design. Hear about her unconventional life and brilliant career, why she designed a garden at Green Spring, and how they continue to protect her important legacy. You can register for that for $15 per person at fairfaxcounty.gov/park/park-takes. And then on Wednesday, July 22nd, from 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon, you can join me for a session on edible flowers. Discover the delicious world of edible flowers, learn how common garden blooms and herbs can enhance recipes from rose petal cocktails to calendula cream cheese, while offering health benefits and antioxidants. Explore over 20 varieties you may already be growing, plus some exotic options to grow next season. Dried flowers and herbs will be provided for participants to take home. This is an in-person event hosted at Brookside Gardens in Wheaton, Maryland. There's a $50 fee to register, and you can do so through montgomeryparks.org. And then starting now through September 7th from 10 to 4 daily at the U.S. National Arboretum's National Bonsai and Penyang Museum is a new exhibit, Waiting to be Discovered, a viewing stone exhibit. This is free and open to all. To learn more about that, you can go to usna.usda.gov.
This is Christy Page with Green Prints with Benji and the Bees, a story by Fiona M. Jones. Little Benji couldn't say Benji yet. He called himself Bee, and before long, that's what we all called him too, until the day he decided that the real bees in the garden actually were his friends. "They come to visit me," he said one summer morning, kneeling beside a flowering shrub. "My friend Bee, he comes to see me when I'm in the garden." He would stand for long minutes, nose almost brushing the blossoms, watching the bees bumble and dance. His older brother laughed and explained that most bees are female, but Benji wasn't buying it. "He's my friend," he said with quiet certainty. I figured it was a different bee every time, but I didn't correct him. I only reminded them both, again, that bees can sting when startled. Benji solemnly nodded but remained unbothered. He had already touched a bee with his small fingers more than once. "He knows me," Benji said. "He likes me." Years passed. In school, Benji learned how important bees are, how they pollinate plants, how they carry entire ecosystems on wings too small for such a burden. At home, he learned about honey and the sweet work behind it. Then one spring, as if fate were nodding in agreement, Benji, now a teenager, met a beekeeper and researcher who offered him weekend work. He suited up and learned the rhythm of the hives. There were a few stings, of course. Not every bee feels sociable, but Benji didn't mind. The bees were his friends. They always had been. And just today, I read a surprising fact. Scientists have found that bees can recognize human faces and even remember them for days. A toddler's soft cheeks, small, gentle fingertips. Maybe garden bees really did know our little bee. Maybe they were visiting their friend too. And this has been The Last Word by Christy Page at greenprints.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. This episode was made by real humans. It was produced and hosted by myself, Kathy Jentz. The Let the Sunshine music interludes are by James Mulvaney. If you like this episode, you may also enjoy listening to GardenDC Podcast Episode 279, How and When to Prune Hydrangeas. Episode 142, Hydrangea Care and Pruning. Episode 60, Hydrangea Varieties with Andrew Bunting. You can become a listener supporter by going to the link in our show notes. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Pinterest at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app. Please take a moment to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC and with your gardening friends so other gardeners can find us too. Happy gardening!